Well, thank you, Karen, for joining us. And usually, how I like to start these conversations is really about an individual's journey. And I'm grateful enough when I get to talk to people. They're kind of doing something pretty amazing. They've sort of impacting lives on a daily basis, and doing what they can to spark inspiration in the world. And maybe we could start after you graduated from West Point, or you could start before that. But talk a little bit about the journey before Pioneer came into your preview.
I am so glad to be here, Grant. It's just such an honor. So, again, thanks for having me on your show today. So, my journey was an interesting one. I grew up in late 70s, late 70s and 80s, my formative years. I was in middle school in the 70s. And so it was a short time after the Civil Rights Act in some ways.
Yeah.
And so I grew up seeing discrimination, disparate treatment, both on a racial and also a gender basis. And I always thought that things weren't fair. And I wanted life to be more fair from a simplistic point of view. So my life just kind of turned out that I just continued to work towards that value. My time at West Point was a really impactful time for me in my life. All cadets at military academy have an honor code. Even today, that honor code it's still really lived at our nation's military academy. And when I see instances of life not being fair to people, or when life is not fair to me, I just get the desire to do something about it. So when I was in the military after West Point, women were still severely restricted with what they could do and what they couldn't do. And that was bothersome. There were very few branches that we could enter. That was a branch is a field where you work. And we were limited to what was called combat support and combat service support at that time, not like today. And the Army was still struggling with discrimination against African Americans, against Black people. And so after my service, I said to myself, I'm going to get out of the Army and I'm going to be a civil rights lawyer. And I know that's kind of funny today looking back, but that's what I wanted to do at the time. And then I went to law school, and I also studied business just in case it didn't work out. But I did
Absolutely.
I practiced law for a few years, and I realized that being a civil rights lawyer is not as sexy as you would think it is. I mean, it's just a lot of
It's a grind, huh?
work.
Yeah.
It's a grind. It's a lot of small cases, and it just wasn't completely satisfying to me. So then I went into business and went through management. And as I progressed in my career, I learned how to run organizations. I learned how to oversee companies, and I've been able to take that skill and propel it to the work I do today. After I left the practice of law directly, I moved into management, and I had a very traditional middle management career with our private utility here in Washington called Puget Sound Energy. And from there, I went to run a state agency in the Gregoire administration. That was the name of our governor at the time, and was a member of her cabinet. And from that job, I went to Pioneer. You know, the job when I was on the cabinet was an interesting one. I was the commissioner of the labor department here in our state, which is called the Employment Security Department. And in that department, you oversee the labor economists for the state. They're the guys that publish the unemployment rate.
Yeah.
And so every month, the economists would send up the data of the workforce. And that's when I really saw the disparate impacts of people that are disenfranchised. It is tremendous. And I just think most of us just don't have that data in front of our face every month. But the wage gap is just right there. And it's most extreme for people of color, African Americans, people that have a felony conviction or coming out of an institution, or migrant farm workers. Just those groups of people were just, their wages are shockingly low. Their ability to accumulate wealth is shockingly low. They're evicted from their homes at much higher rates from others. Their health outcomes are much more poor. And after seeing that data month after month, I said to myself, I just want to do more and more. I really worked hard when I was, at our state to be to bring solutions to our state within the lanes of the mission of the agency. And from there, I came to Pioneer Human Services, where I've tried to continue that same work. Now, Pioneer is a social enterprise which combines business practices and nonprofit mission oriented work all together. So we have manufacturing company, construction company, where the people that we serve can have careers and well-paying work, and then the profitability from that part of our organization, it supports some of the mission work from the services side of our organization, with the entire company really focused on reducing mass incarceration and its impacts on all people, with an understanding that that there is inequity, and that we want to be part of that solution, and we want everyone who has been involved with the criminal justice system to live a healthy and productive life, regardless of what has happened in their past.
Yeah, I mean, there's so many different dynamics that you spoke about. I want to talk about the data real quick. Like you said, I mean, people just don't see it every month, right? It's hard to relate or comprehend issues that you're not sort of close to or see every single month. What were some of the data points that you do see? Does it give you just a age, race? Like, what data points do you see, and what really popped out at you? Was it also education? I guess I want to hit so many things here, and I'm trying to look at what did the data tell you when you first started to see it, maybe like your first 6 months after looking at it? What really was very pronounced to you?
The unemployment rate that was disaggregated by race was significantly higher than for white people, for lack of
Hmm.
a better term.
Hmm.
And then the other thing that jumped out at me was the wages that migrant workers worked at. Those things just, I mean, migrant workers in our state, the state of Washington, the tree fruit that you eat comes from our state. And so somebody's got to pick that stuff.
Hmm. Hmm.
Pickers, the farm workers, are overwhelmingly Mexican or Mexican American, first generation Mexican, and they're still paid by how much they pick. So, I mean, those folks work all year for $20,000 a year
Hmm.
and not great working conditions. So it was those two groups that I would just look at the data, and it just makes you want to cry.
What could the state do? Like what are some of the systems you try to put in place that help those data points obviously get better over time? The state
Hmm.
is obviously handcuffed in a lot of different ways. It could do a lot, but it's hard to be sort of innovative. But it can
Hmm.
allocate capital, right? It can sort of look at systems and maybe create programs that could help over
Hmm.
time, right? What are some of the things that maybe did work or have worked or can work that you've seen?
Well, I would say at the state level, you look at data in much larger buckets. And
Hmm.
so this is going back about 10 years. And then right when we got some energy, the recession hit. So we
Hmm.
had to cut a lot
Hmm.
of programs. But we tried to really expand temporary aid for needy families. We tried to, we wanted to expand educational access for lower income families, also looking at job training programs and apprenticeship opportunities for low income individuals and individuals of color to the extent possible in our state. So those were three main tools that we would use, education, apprenticeship,
Hmm.
TANF, right?
Creating skill
And
sets,
that's
right?
right.
Yeah.
Yeah. And job development is always important. People from poor communities will look for work, but they won't have networks to help them.
Hmm.
So they always have to take the hardest route to get a job. And then there might be something about them that an employer can discriminate, their name or how they look, or their race or their gender, their ethnicity, or the fact that they have a felony conviction. So all
Yeah.
these barriers, we call barriers to employment, we typically from the state, we would work on the individual to try to put them in the best position. I don't think that we were very effective at working on employers, making employers want and
Yeah.
feel obligated to change their hiring practice. And so in the 10 years since then, we've tried to work both those angles, right?
Hmm.
You
Hmm.
definitely want to work with the individual to put them in the best position possible to live their life, whether it's attaching them to benefits that they deserve or if it's helping them in the labor market. But at the same time, employers and landlords have to do their part, which is to give people opportunity and to not give in to implicit bias and open their hearts and minds to hiring individuals that they may have shunned before. So I think that that has a big part to play. And only recently have we been willing to have those discussions head on as a society, but I see improvement there.
And this is what I sort of love about Pioneer and kind of doing some reading and research of it, is that it really incorporates business and skill
Mm-hmm.
training into development, right? I mean, the only way I think these data points sort of change is a mass sort of like skill deployment of humans, right?
Mm-hmm.
And while technology can still obviously take away jobs and things like that, it'll still create different jobs. And so
Mm-hmm.
obviously training is huge, right? And whether it's a
Mm-hmm.
person coming from out of rehab or out of the prison system, it has to be somewhere to go.
Yes.
And I think that if there's skill development and training and an opportunity to get better, right? If you don't even have an opportunity to get better, how can you get better, right? So
Mm-hmm.
I love the idea of incorporating business and skill training because it's such a sustainable approach to an issue. So talk a little bit about Pioneer and sort of its approach, because it's a very big organization. It's a lot of programs. So kind of start where you want to start, but I want to get into sort of the nitty gritty of all the work that the organization's doing.
Well, I think what we can do is to start with people and
Okay.
their journey. When you think about crime, first of all, our relationship with crime as a society is interesting. I think it's shaped by TV.
Hmm.
We watch Law and Order. I tell people today, don't watch Law and Order. Just don't even watch it. Don't watch any cop shows because we watch those TV shows over and over and over, and it cements in our mind this idea about criminal behavior and the bad guy in their story is always really bad. And that's a very judgmental approach to looking at people. People don't start out that way.
Right.
I mean, maybe rarely a person is born and, they just are born with no morals, but I would put that in the less than the 3% of
Totally.
all the people that commit crime, right? So people are born and, many things can happen in that birth to 5, birth to 10, birth
Hmm.
to 14 journey that impacts them the rest of their life. And we can look at someone and not know their story at all. And their stories are different to how they get to why they're making poor decisions. So some people are unlucky and they're charged and they were innocent the whole time, but I'll just set that to the side for a second
Sure.
and talk about people that do make poor decisions. Maybe they were exposed to trauma before 5. Maybe their
Hmm.
mother or father were incarcerated. Maybe mother wasn't around. Maybe there was abuse going on in the household. Maybe they saw something very traumatic. Maybe they saw someone murdered. Maybe something happened. Maybe there was sexual abuse going on in their household. Or maybe they had just a really low attention span and just jumped around in the house all the time when they were a kid. And so their teachers always sent them to the principal's office.
Hmm. Hmm.
For whatever reason, people start to find this, they're kind of outcast. And you see it starting as the second and then fourth grade and then fifth grade and then sixth grade, you start to see expulsions. And then by eighth grade, looking for love and attention in gangs and running the streets or, not wanting to live at home. And you see parents trying to corral their children and being unable to, sending kids to live with relatives. But one of the things that's common across all that is witnessing trauma. I was a middle
Interesting.
class child growing up. My parents were solidly middle class professionals. My dad was in the army and my mom was a teacher. So, other than maybe having the death of a dog or a pet, I don't know that I witnessed trauma. That is not the background of the people that they portray as being very bad on Law and Order. And that trauma isn't dealt with well And all of a sudden, their coping skills, drugs become involved. Drugs are present in something like
Mm-hmm.
between 60 and 80% of arrests, drugs are involved.
Yep.
Whether the person perpetrating the crime is on drugs, but they're involved. And George Floyd's life story is very similar to many of the people that we serve here at
Mm-hmm.
Pioneer, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
They get caught up into drugs. There's a lifestyle associated with it that you and I would not relate to. And then there's the course of addiction, or you have poor decisions. If your crimes don't involve drugs, then it might be cheating, lying or cheating. So it's one of those. It's drugs or lying or cheating or stealing. But those are all things that people can change from when
Right.
given the right, what we call treatment, and the right environment. Because at the end of the day, we all want to be loved in society. We want our children to be proud of us. We want our friends to be proud of us. We're social.
Yeah.
And so Pioneer intervenes at all of those stages depending on the person's life history, their basic needs, and their criminogenic risk patterns. Why do they make the decisions that they do? And let's get at that. And because addiction is so prevalent in people that are often sent to jail and prison, we have a lot of treatment for that. We have residential
Mm-hmm.
substance use disorder treatment. We have opioid use disorder treatment. We have co-occurring drug treatment, because a lot of people in jail are struggling with addiction. For people that are living a lifestyle that's based on lack of economic opportunity, then that's what we address with them. So then it's more of getting stability with housing, and then thinking that yes, you are worthy, you can have a legal job, you can be in the labor market, and this is what it takes, and this is how you can get there. So we have training and intervention for that. And then for women in particular, many of them have relationship issues where they get caught up with
Yep.
a man to give them love, a man, a woman to give them love, that's living a lifestyle, living a life of crime. And so we work with them. So it really, there's a whole there's a theory that is the best evidence, the best science today, and it's called risk need responsivity, and that's what we use here at Pioneer. And so we assess for everybody's, why they act the way they do with respect to criminal behavior. And then we develop a plan specific to them. And then we couple that with healthcare needs and then basic needs. So basic needs such as housing and food. If you think about Maslow's hierarchy of needs, that has to be addressed. Then you layer that with health, and
Mm-hmm.
then you layer that with criminogenic risks. And you combine all those together and you can really help people. And that's why our results are so good, because we have all of those.
When does this sort of skills training or sort of job placement enter into the ecosystem?
That comes in late. So that will come in after you've got stability, after the person's in recovery.
Mm-hmm.
If substance use disorder was a part of their background, after they've gotten into relationship, they've started to recover their relationship. That the job training comes last, because you have to have your life at a certain point before you can be a quality employee for somebody
Interesting. Yeah.
else.
Yeah.
And so where I see a lot of programs go wrong, where they start job training right away and the person may not even have a place to live.
Right. No, it's a great point.
So so your client, we have to start with Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Let's get shelter and stability first.
I want to talk a little bit about the criminal justice system and sort of the one thing that I always looked at as, an issue is treatment of a so-called, criminal, right? And I think the majority of individuals incarcerated are nonviolent. So to me, that could be anybody, right? And I think we look at people that are incarcerated much different than we look at our neighbors or something like that. And nonviolent individuals may have, a drug issue or maybe they're not even a user of drugs. Maybe they're just a distributor, right? And they're selling it for one reason or another, right? But they're not have a violent past or a criminal record of violence at all. And that's always been what's been disappointing to me, is that we treat a non-violent person the same as a violent criminal, which I think is two separate things. And that's an opinion, right? That could be it could be a difference of opinion for a lot of people. But I do think there's a difference between a person who turns to violence and then turns to drugs, or I guess I say that to like the treatment of individuals not going to prison, right? Like, what is there another alternative we can do for
Mhm.
non-violent offenders? I think we have to figure that out first, and then we can get to.
I don't know that I agree with you
Okay.
on whether our treatment should turn on the violence of their crime. I don't know that I agree with that.
I guess I should have said that I don't believe that a person should get arrested for drugs and go to prison. I think if
Okay,
you know
that's
what I'm saying,
different.
like
Yeah,
I
yeah,
phrase it very, very badly, right? But I
yeah,
look at murder as much different than you know heroin possession. To me, that there's two different issues there. A
yeah,
person with addiction issues versus a person who sort of is a bit violent and detrimental to society rather than just themselves as an
yeah.
addict.
I'll throw one more twist to say,
Okay.
if I am a person that embezzled retirement funds,
Mm-hmm.
like
Mm-hmm.
say I'm Bernie Madoff or someone like that,
Sure.
from people's whole life savings, you could argue that that's non-violent. True.
But they
Um,
affected other people, right? That they
exactly.
damaged other people. So
Yes.
yes, I would put that in the same category, right? A person
Yeah.
that is addicted to drugs is really destroying themselves, and they can affect society obviously if they drive while high or drunk and hit, right? I mean, there's obviously stages of that, but if a person is addicted to heroin or opioids, I feel like that can sort of get solved
Hmm.
through
Yep.
an ecosystem of whether it's treatment, skills training,
Hmm.
opportunity, right?
Yep. Addicts make, I mean, let's be clear, at someone who is suffering from substance use disorder is not making good decisions.
Totally. Right.
They are not making
Yeah.
good decisions. I got my car broken into a couple years ago,
Hmm.
and it was right after my dad died, and I was in San Francisco, and I was actually visiting a company a lot like Pioneer that works with folks that are disenfranchised. And so I rented a car, and I had some books in the back, and one of those books, it was Dale Carnegie. My dad liked Dale
Hmm.
Carnegie,
Hmm.
How to Win Friends and
Yeah.
Influence People. And he had written all through the front page. He just wrote me this note about, he wrote it to me when I was in middle school. And so my dad had, passed away. It was, 5 years ago, a month after his death. And somebody broke in my car and stole that book.
Mm.
Out of all the things they could have taken, they took the book. That was like my heart.
Right.
And I just remember being so upset, in tears, checking all the dumpsters, and finally, I missed my flight. It was just awful. And I've thought about that because I've thought, what person would break into a car and steal a Dale Carnegie book?
Hmm. Hmm.
And it was an area where you could just tell what drugs are in the area.
Sure.
But what kind of sentence would I want for that person? Would I want a three strikes you're out? So where those in Washington, we had that, right? Three crimes, you get life.
Yeah.
And
I don't like
you
that.
know
That's a problem.
and I was hurt so badly, and I wanted the person to be found. But after 3 weeks, I calmed down. It took me a couple weeks, but I really didn't want a life sentence for that person. As a victim, I wanted my deductible paid. But I wanted that person to just get better and not do that anymore. And I talk about that because when politicians run for office, they run on a public safety platform, they talk and they try to make us believe that long sentences and warehousing people is good for our society. And it isn't, because people have children, people have wives. You know, when we put folks away, then all of a sudden you're condemning that next generation. And so
And
I
even
talked,
and it costs a lot.
yeah,
And
it's
it costs this
certainly,
it's expensive to
yes,
just lock people up and throw away the
yeah,
key. It's very
yeah,
expensive.
yeah. 60 to 70% of all county budgets are related to public safety and law enforcement.
The better
Why can't,
investment would be in
yes,
invest in that person to get
education.
better, and then
Yeah,
they become a
exactly.
taxpayer. They become a
Yes.
taxpayer.
So, what I would want, and we're trying to work with our local partners to offer this in Washington, where I live, is something where we have treatment on demand. I mean, when people are, severe, when they are suffering from substance use disorder, you could argue that they're really not in the right mind.
Sure.
The drugs are if you study addiction studies, the pleasure center of your brain becomes like oversized. And it is screaming for that drug, and people do things they wouldn't normally do. So we do need to somehow protect people when they're in the throes of that drug. So is that jail? Absolutely not. But it is something.
Sure.
And
No,
so
definitely.
and so whether it's pressure for treatment, stabilization, on demand treatment, certainly we need to get people that are suffering from substance use disorder into treatment right away, and to see if we can break that. So we want to intervene in that cycle of addiction, in that course of addiction, the best that we can, because drugs today are powerful. They're
Mm-hmm.
more powerful than they were in
Mm-hmm.
the 40s and 50s, and we have to acknowledge that. And then I think we have to also be much more forgiving when we look back at someone's record and we see a felony conviction. And we can either do more to close records down so that we don't
Mm-hmm.
have the same access, or we have to discipline ourselves to be more open when we're making renting decisions or hiring decisions. But I think we have to do all of those things because we have a lot of challenges in our society, and people are self-medicating those challenges, and then we're blaming them when they self-medicate and they make poor decisions.
And they
I'm
don't
not
have
here to,
and they
yes.
don't have a really good
Mhm.
lawyer to get them out there sentencing, or I mean, there's so much goes into after the arrest as well, right? And if you're poor, you sort of don't really have a chance of getting your sentence sort of down to a misdemeanor or something like that, right?
Yeah.
It's all plea deals,
hmm
right? But if you have money for a good lawyer, then the same charge, you're going to get
hmm
a very, very different
Yeah.
sentence or punishment. That's a whole
Yeah.
nother issue.
It sure is. I mean, and Black people can just be around someone else.
Mm,
They don't even have to actually commit the actual crime.
mhm, mhm.
Just for a Black person, if you're just around another Black person who's got a criminal lifestyle, you'll be arrested and charged too.
I want to talk a little bit about the process and like when a person comes in, what's that life cycle? Are we talking like 9 months to a year where they go through sort of treatment and then they're at a point to where, okay, they can start sort of the educational process or the skills training process, learn a craft, learn a trade or something like that? Like how long is that life cycle for a person that comes through Pioneer?
Everybody's different, right?
Hmm.
Some
Hmm.
people already have a trade, they already have a place to live, and they have supportive families. So for folks like that, then you're just dealing with the addiction.
Gotcha.
So that's it. Or some people they don't have an addiction, but they have a felony conviction, and they don't have a supportive family. So all they need is a place to live.
Hmm. Hmm.
And then some people, have all of those barriers, every single barrier, no supportive family, struggling with addiction, their housing situation is insecure, they don't have any legal way to have money coming in the door, they're not
Hmm.
attached to their benefits, they don't have a driver's license,
Hmm.
and they have a lot of legal and financial obligations.
It's a daunting task.
Yes. So that when I talk about it's individual, it's very, very individual. So what we try to do at Pioneer is have the right set of services just for you. And then the amount of services depends on the community. So Pioneer doesn't have to offer all the services. We just have to make sure that we offer that there are services that are available to you. So, for example, if you have a felony conviction and you don't have a place to live, but you want to be, you want to be a software developer, there's
Hmm.
another nonprofit in Seattle that will teach that.
Nice.
So they don't have to come to Pioneer for everything. If they want to become a cook, there's another nonprofit in Seattle that specializes in helping people get into the restaurant industry.
Hmm. Hmm.
So part of it is for us to just make sure that we are navigating. That's another word for connecting people to the services that they need so that they can be successful.
How many individuals usually come through annually through
Uh,
Pioneer, or even if you want to go broader over the last decade, you sort of been there.
Yeah. Well, we serve about 10,000 people a year
Wow.
in different capacities. So we have jail diversion, and so our whole job is to keep people out of jail.
Hmm. Hmm.
And it kind of depends on where they are on the disease path of addiction. So people that are still actively using, we want them to have a safe place that they can come and sleep, where we can try to talk to them to say, are you ready to start your recovery today? So that part of the company probably is maybe 1,500 a year. It's just a matter of just not having people go to jail, exposing them to treatment. Then we have another 2,000 that we serve with case management in one of our locations, right? And we'll navigate with that person to services. Then we have another group, I would put this in about 2,000, that we are just offering residential treatment services to them for substance use disorder or for co-occurring. Then we have another group of folks that we work on an outpatient basis that had a crime that if they go through 2 years of treatment, then that crime will be wiped off their record. So they're
Interesting.
called in what's felony drug court diversion. And we have another group of people that we provide in jail services to. And then we have about, I would say, 900 apartments that people can live in throughout our service territory. And then we have another whole group of people that work at Pioneer Industries and, building airplane parts.
Yeah, I
Uh,
kind of wanted to. It's a perfect segue because I
yeah.
kind of wanted to get into
Uh-huh.
that side of of
Yeah.
the
And then we have
organization.
job training.
Yeah, yeah,
So it's
it's
that full
incredible.
range, right? Yeah.
Talk a little bit about that side of the organization. People actually, whether it's building blades, right, or other sort of skilled labor jobs. Talk about that sort of ecosystem. Is that people that come out of the pioneer sort of journey, and sort of you can see who's, I guess, qualified or equipped to sort of take
Hmm.
this responsibility on to kind of start sort of in the workforce.
So Pioneer has a company that is an aerospace manufacturing company, and it is skilled machining is the basis of what we do. And so those are competitive positions.
I'd imagine.
About, yeah. So we average about 60% of the workforce in Pioneer Industries has a felony conviction or is in recovery.
Wow.
But all those jobs are competitive. So typically what we do is we have our job training programs, and our job training programs, the graduates can work anywhere. They don't have to work at Pioneer Industries.
Hmm.
We have job developers that go out into the community, and we create relationships with employers in town. And so our job training program is kind of agnostic to which career you want to have. And then if the person wants to get into aerospace manufacturing, then they have to go to 13 more weeks of school
Hmm.
to learn the basics of being in aerospace manufacturing. Then they can apply to an open position in Pioneer. And then
Is that
um,
education free for them? Like, how
um,
would they pay for? Do they have to pay something small, or on the back end or something?
it is free for the most part. And then we also have stipends.
Hmm.
We have a partner here that runs a state program, and we can normally get folks into their program.
That's great.
So,
Yeah.
like I said, you have to have relationships with partners so you don't have to do it all.
It's listen, access. I mean, access to that alone is
Yeah.
unbelievable.
Mm-hmm.
The
Yeah.
opportunity that
Mm-hmm.
it's a life changer. You know.
Yeah, and so here it's called AJAC, the Aerospace Joint Apprenticeship Commission, that operates the training program. So anyway, the graduates come and then they can apply, and we'll have Tech 1, Tech 2 positions come open frequently. We have a distribution warehouse in the next county down by Tacoma that they can come in that way, and you don't have to be skilled at all to work in the warehouse. That's an entry level job down there. And we have computer programmers, and you have the opportunity. We have front office positions for a full lifelong career at Pioneer. One thing that we make that you've probably seen, we make about 1 million to 2 million parts a year in aerospace. Right now, travel is down because we have COVID,
Sure.
but generally we make several million parts a year. But we make in the 737 series of aircraft, we make
Mm-hmm.
the escape hatch assemblies. That's that exit row door that
Oh
you sit
yeah.
next to.
Oh
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, yeah, we make those here at Pioneer, but we also make a lot of other parts that you can't see as easily. We have a lot. We just do a lot of aluminum machining, we call it, and the machinery we have is state of the art. We have 3, 4, and 5. We have 3 and 4 axis mills that are operated by computer programming, and we have staff that have been to school. They go back to school and then they'll get an associate's degree or a technical bachelor's degree, and they'll just do great things
Amazing.
for our company.
Amazing. I want to kind of
Hmm.
talk, I want to throw some numbers out there, but then I want you to kind of add some more to it, or some context to it. And
Okay.
79% secure employment, is that when they
Yeah.
step into the Pioneer Door organization, or is that after they're complete a program or something like that? Because that's a very high
Hmm.
number of people.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. That's after our job training programs. Hmm.
Wow. Wow.
Hmm.
And then 96% have no new arrests.
That's
Like,
correct.
to
Hmm.
me, that is like the number that that's that's all you have to put out there. Like, that is unbelievable. And I think the one thing that I like to say, how I think of things, is having purpose is like a very important thing in a person's life. And usually when you don't have purpose, you go down some bad paths. And I think having the ability to even have a job, right? Whatever job it may be, at its simplest form, like having employment, gives people purpose. And I think
Hmm.
it's such a simple thing, right, to say, I guess, but like, it's such a powerful motivator, I think, for people to have purpose. And I think at its base level, I think a job gives individuals a sense of purpose, at a foundational level. So I think that's why that number is so important.
Hmm. Well, I think that a good job does, certainly.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. I was just yesterday. So I went into the office yesterday. I try to go in once a week. And one of our vendors had sent us a box of popcorn or something. So I took it down. My office is over our second plant. We have
Mm-hmm.
3 manufacturing plants. And so I'm in plant 2. And so I walked downstairs, and it was lunchtime. And I was talking to one of our employees, and she was telling me, she said, she almost had her AA, and she wanted to be a chemical dependency counselor. And she was working, I think she's a machinist right now, but so many people that have struggled with prison when
Mm-hmm.
they're younger,
Mm-hmm.
when they're older, they want to give back.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And she was just telling me that all she wanted to do was be a substance use disorder professional. And she was so excited. She almost had her AA, and then she wanted to go back and get her bachelor's.
Amazing.
So, and then she said she wanted to change jobs. She wanted to get out of the plant, and she wanted to actually work in one of our treatment facilities. But the desire to give back is strong in so many of our employees, and all they want to do is help people.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
so it's I think that you're right about that. So it's not just the job, but it's like it's what do you want to do with your life?
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
people with lived experience are much more believable for our clients than someone like me.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I love to talk to clients, but you know what? They're going to listen to someone who's walked their path.
Yeah. But I also think, like, and jobs is such an interesting thing, because you cannot even know what's available in the world, right? You sometimes think a job is a job, or a career is a career, right? But like, you don't even know, like, growing up. I mean, now it's different because we have technology, right? You can kind of search any type of job and kind of be anything, right? But like, growing up without the internet, and growing up in sort of, neighborhoods, or environments, like, you don't even know, like, like a software engineer is even a job. you don't even know what a real estate agent is a job. Like growing up, I didn't really know a lot of different jobs. I grew up around, my dad was a laborer and my mom worked in retail, right? And we
Mm-hmm.
had like an oil refinery, like that was the big job, right? Or like an elevator union, right? But
Mm-hmm.
like you don't know like a graphic designer is a thing. You don't know
Mm-hmm.
an architect is a thing. So I think sometimes when people are down and out and struggling with addiction or whatever it is, I think that they don't know what's out there a lot of the times, right? It's hard for them to get inspired by things because the things around them are not very inspiring. So I just think having a job allows you to see what else is sort of out there, right? Even if it's at your own job, maybe you're the low person on the totem pole at some place, but you see different jobs, right, within that facility, within that company or whatever. And you're like, oh, maybe I want to do that, I want to do that. Or, you work in a client base, like, oh, I kind of want to go do what they're doing, right? It's same thing
Mm-hmm.
with what she said. She kind of wants to transition now to a different career path. But I just think it's just so important to have that
Mm-hmm.
inspiration, to understand what you can even do with your life, what the possibilities are. And it's just struggle for a lot of people, I think, even now still.
Hmm. I think you're right. And the young lady I was talking to yesterday, she had dropped out of school in the eighth grade,
Yeah.
and that's
Right.
common. That is,
Yeah,
it's
totally.
common for
Yeah.
the people that we work with. And so for her, I think she just needed to see
Yeah.
someone that had that path be able to have whatever job they wanted.
Hmm.
So I've observed that as well. People will be aware of all these jobs, but they'll feel like someone like them, that job isn't available to them. And I would say from a societal perspective, we often do that. When we say a lawyer can't be someone who's gone to prison, or a doctor can't be
Hmm.
someone who's
Hmm.
gone to
Hmm.
prison. You mentioned a real estate agent. A person with a felony conviction can't be a real estate agent. So there are so many careers that are locked away from people because of a mistake they might have made when they were 18 or 19.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think that they really, I think that folks believe that job isn't there for them, which is sad. And in our state, we have a representative. Her name is Tara Simmons, who was our first legislator who had been incarcerated, and she
Hmm.
was just elected this year.
That's great. That's amazing.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
What was her background? What did she get incarcerated for?
Drugs.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yep.
You can overcome it. It's
Yep.
it's one of the things there's just so many pathways.
Yes.
I'd love to end on maybe some optimism a little bit about maybe what
Mm-hmm.
you've seen over your decade of being in the organization, leading the organization. What are you sort of optimistic about maybe for the next decade, and maybe societal changes that you do see that are optimistic, your overall outlook for sort of the future of what good could sort of happen.
I'm very optimistic about, federally, this administration, they at least acknowledge that, corrections week right out
Hmm.
of the gate.
Hmm.
So that's a good thing. On our state, in the state of Washington, where I live, there's a lot that's going on. We had a big Supreme Court decision 2 months ago called the Blake decision, where it decriminalized simple possession
Yep. Yep.
of controlled substances. So that's exciting. We're chipping away at the three strikes law that I talked about for folks that have repeated felony convictions.
Is that three
We
strikes, three drug charges as well? That it could just be nothing violent. It could just be drug
Yeah, it
possession.
did
Right.
not have to be violent. You're
Mm-hmm.
right.
Mm-hmm.
So we're starting to chip away at that. We're looking at our sentencing. We have a big sentencing task force at the state level right now. Our counties are trying to be really creative with what we call jail diversion. I could talk about that a whole nother hour, but
Yeah.
um, but that's where you send people to treatment rather than jail.
Yes, totally.
So I have a lot to be positive about in our state. We had a big victory here a week or so ago when our governor signed an expansion of our voting rights to people that are under
Mm-hmm.
supervision
Mm-hmm.
of the court system. So I feel really positive about where we're going as a society. And I'm just hoping that there's not going to be a backlash and that we continue to, be more loving towards each other.
Well, I think producing the outcomes that you're producing is a great way to show and change things, right? Because it's always, I think, easy to say, hey, we need to do things differently, right? Or change this or change
Mhm.
that. But
Mhm.
okay, well, what's the alternative, right? And
Yeah.
I think the blueprint is sort of there, which you have sort of led, and I'm sure there's other organizations across the country that maybe you admire or doing some similar things. So I think
Mhm.
if there's an alternative, right? You said like, what is okay? We don't want to send individuals to prison, but what is the alternative? What can we do, right? That is better.
Mhm.
We need that sort of roadmap,
Mhm.
and it seems like it's sort of getting there, where it's like it seems pointless to send an addict to jail where they have to become violent, right? Or they
Mhm.
have even more trauma happen to them there. And it's
Exactly.
expensive for the taxpayer. And it's
Mhm.
just like there has to be a better alternative for this. And so I'm happy to see that there's organizations out there doing it, right? And just like you said that being a criminal justice lawyer or civil rights lawyer was a grind. So is this in a lot of ways, right? I mean, repairing this person's life is a grind,
Mhm.
right? I mean, you have to be consistent every day,
Mhm.
you as the leaders in the organization, but also the
Mhm.
individuals walking in, right? Every
Mhm.
day it's a brick to build the house.
Yeah.
So, they're on a daily grind as well.
Mhm.
So thank you so
And
much
it's
for the work you do.
I just want to say, having a loving society is so important because people's paths to recovery aren't linear,
Oh yeah,
right?
totally.
They'll make two good decisions and then a not so good decision, and then three good decisions and then a not so good decision. But after a while, they'll get there. And we're just so, unforgiving. And I just think that so if each of us can be more loving, it will help. If you want to learn more about Pioneer or social justice, please, please, please come to our website and take our mass incarceration quiz so that you can learn more about it. pioneerhumanservices.org/quiz and just peruse our website. We've got a lot of articles. We have client stories. You'll see the advocacy issues that we're working on to make the world a better place. We'd love for the listeners to this podcast to become a supporter.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much, Karen.